The Wall Street Journal had a bit of a scathing editorial a couple of days ago where they described this as a face-saving cancellation because, quite frankly, there isn't space at this time to make progress on some of the key issues the WTO needs to address because there's a lack of consensus among leading countries. Is that a fair representation of where we are at the moment on the free trade agenda?
The answer is no. I think that the assessment, perhaps they are not conscious of several of the things that are happening at the WTO. For instance, on the issue of sustainability of the oceans and our fisheries resources, negotiations have been going on for 21 years without result. But for the first time, we have momentum. And we actually expected that at this meeting, we would be able to close the deal with ministers. So the issue is that even though the meeting was postponed through no fault of WTO's, we are continuing work apace. Everybody feels we can really clinch this agreement. So we are going to set ourselves a deadline of after the holidays, early next year, trying to get to yes on this dossier. So that it's not quite correct that nothing is moving. I also want to say that there are other areas. Let me tell you, for instance, there's going to be closure today on the regulation of domestic services, and which is being negotiated here by about 67 countries. And that's a huge one. It's going to save about 145 billion for services businesses with a tremendous fall in costs. In some areas like banking, for instance, computer services, 11% fall in costs. These are estimates that we have, and OECD has also done some work. So just to illustrate two things that are happening. So it's not correct that it was a face-saving measure. No, we had some things lined up to complete.
But Dr. Ngozi, this morning we've been showing our audience live pictures from Stockholm of the OSCE meeting where we have the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, meeting his foreign minister counterparts from Ukraine, from Russia. And anybody looking at those pictures will think, well, if they felt safe enough to hold in-person conversations at a ministerial level, why wasn't the WTO willing to hold in-person conversations at your level, a ministerial level, given how important it is that we get some progress on the treatment of trade as it relates to emerging and developed economies, that we talk about the issue of equitable distribution of vaccines and all these so important matters?
Well, let me address that. First of all, the OSCE meeting is quite different. At the WTO, the ministers come in to actually work, to negotiate with each other, not to talk with each other, but actual legally binding agreements that are being negotiated. So there are 164 members, and it has always been the case that if some members cannot be around the table, then it is regarded as totally inequitable to have a group of members negotiating when others are not there. And the point is that 6 Southern African countries were immediately restricted from traveling from their countries into Europe. So everyone knows that. And then many more countries were added rapidly, up to 12 countries. So I do not understand how you would allow negotiations to go on absent 12 countries from the table. How would you deal with that? And it's not the kind of thing you can use technology to do, really, because there are a lot of little side deals and conversations in order to get to yes. So that was one reason. The other is we have ministers and delegations flying in from 164 countries. That's a little different from a smaller meeting. And so the health implications of this, we followed Swiss government guidelines, and it did not seem safe to have all those people arrive here. I think we have to have the health and safety of people in mind first, and then equity of negotiations next. It was a very painful decision. You can imagine that the staff in the secretariat, the members, we've all been working night and day, negotiating night and day. It was a very difficult decision, but everyone here agrees it was the best. We should put people's safety above everything else.